Leela Shah looked at me in disbelief. I slowly stood up and wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth. For 10 years, I had been willing to lower my head for her. But that moment was different. There was nothing left inside me that wanted to fight for this marriage. I looked at Ethan. Are you satisfied now? Ethan's expression changed. Mason, I never asked you to kneel. I gave him a cold smile. Of course you didn't. Then I turned toward Leela. You wanted me to apologize, I did. I placed the divorce papers on the table. Now let me go. Leela stared at me. For some reason, a strange feeling suddenly appeared in her heart. She had expected anger. She had expected me to beg. She had expected me to cling to her as I had done for the past 10 years. But Mason had become completely silent. And that frightened her more than his anger ever had. Where are you going? I looked at her. To say goodbye to my father. Her expression froze. I walked out before she could answer. That night, I returned to the small apartment I had rented. There was almost nothing inside. One bed. One table. A few clothes. And a framed photograph of my father. I picked it up and stared at it for a long time. Dad. My voice trembled. I'm sorry. Tears finally fell from my eyes. I couldn't save you. I remembered him lying in that hospital bed. I remembered Mom crying. I remembered my son asking where Grandpa was. And I remembered Leela telling me that my father's treatment would continue. If only I had known the truth earlier. If only I had checked everything myself. Maybe Dad would still be alive. I sat alone until the sky outside became completely dark. Then I noticed the divorce papers on the table. I picked them up. My signature was already there. For 10 years, Leela had been my entire world. Now that world was gone. I whispered. It's over. The next morning, Leela received a call. It was from my landlord. Mason didn't come out of his apartment all night. Leela's heart skipped. Where is he? He's inside. I tried knocking but there's no response. She immediately stood up. Ethan looked at her. What happened? Mason. She grabbed her bag and left. For the first time, she felt genuinely afraid. She rushed to the apartment. The door opened. The room was silent. Mason was lying unconscious on the bed. Beside him was a letter. Leela's hands began shaking. Mason. She rushed toward me. But I didn't respond. She called for help immediately. As the ambulance arrived, Leela picked up the letter with trembling hands. There were only a few lines. Leela. You don't need to worry anymore. I won't bother you again. Please take care of our son. And tell him Grandpa loved him very much. Her eyes filled with tears. No. For the first time in 10 years, Leela's voice completely broke. Mason, wake up. She grabbed my hand. You can't leave like this. But I didn't respond. The ambulance took me away. Leela followed behind, crying silently. Ethan stood outside the apartment. His expression was completely different. There was no sadness in his eyes. Only fear. Because he knew something Leela didn't. Mason had started investigating. And if Mason survived, everything could be exposed. At the hospital, doctors worked desperately to save me. Leela sat outside the emergency room. Her hands were covered in tears. She kept staring at the closed doors. Then memories began flooding back. Mason waiting for her after work. Mason cooking dinner when she was exhausted. Mason taking care of their son. Mason sitting beside her when she was sick. Mason standing outside the hospital when her mother was ill. 10 years. 10 entire years. She had taken his love for granted. She suddenly remembered the day she first met him. She had been a poor college student. Ethan had rejected her confession. Then he had pointed toward Mason. Mason's poor too, you two would make a perfect match. She had looked at Mason. His face had been nervous. But his eyes were warm. Back then she had thought she was settling. Yet that poor man had stayed beside her for 10 years. When she had nothing, he stayed. When she became successful, he stayed. When everyone else wanted something from her, he never asked for anything. And she had abandoned him the moment Ethan returned. Leela covered her face. What have I done? Hours later, the doctor finally came out. Leela immediately stood up. How is he? The doctor sighed. He's alive. Leela nearly collapsed from relief. But her heart sank. The next few hours are critical. Leela nodded through her tears. I'll stay. The doctor looked at her. Are you his wife? Leela lowered her head. Not anymore. Then she whispered. But I was. Meanwhile, Ethan stood alone in the hospital parking lot. He made a phone call. Is the evidence gone? A man's voice answered. Yes. Ethan closed his eyes. Good. He looked toward the hospital. Mason should never have started digging into the past. The truth was simple. Ethan had never been the helpless friend Mason believed him to be. His business failure had been carefully planned. His wife's bankruptcy had been part of the setup. And the medical money that should have saved Mason's father. Ethan had secretly diverted it through several accounts. He had then made sure Mason would blame Leela. Every argument between Mason and Leela had benefited him. Every misunderstanding had pushed Leela closer to him. And Mason's father's death had been the final piece of his plan. But Ethan had made one mistake. He had underestimated how much Mason knew. The next morning, Leela returned to the apartment. She searched through Mason's belongings. There wasn't much. But inside an old drawer she found a folder. Her hands froze when she opened it. Bank records. Hospital records. Phone numbers. And photographs. At the bottom was one sentence written by Mason. Someone has been stealing Dad's medical money. Leela's face turned pale. She checked the records. Then she noticed something terrifying. The account receiving the stolen money was connected to Ethan. No. She immediately checked another document. Then another. Every trail led back to him. Leela's entire body began trembling. Ethan had lied to her. He had manipulated her. And while she was blaming Mason for everything, Mason's father had been dying because of a plan Ethan had created. Leela suddenly remembered the way Ethan had acted whenever Mason mentioned his father's medical expenses. The fear. The sudden changes of subject. The tears. It had all been an act. She dropped the papers. Mason. For the first time, Leela understood. Mason hadn't been her enemy. He had been the victim. And she had helped the person who destroyed him. She immediately called Ethan. He answered calmly. Leela. Her voice was cold. Where are you? There was silence. Then Ethan asked. Why? Leela clenched her fists. Because I know what you did. The call went silent. And for the first time, Ethan realized that his perfect plan was beginning to collapse. But Leela didn't know one thing yet. Mason was still unconscious. And when he woke up, he might never look at her the same way again. Leela stood alone in the hospital corridor, staring at Ethan. For the first time, the man she had trusted for so long looked like a complete stranger. Tell me the truth, Ethan. Ethan forced a smile. I don't know what you're talking about. Leela threw the folder onto the table. Then explain these bank records. Ethan's face changed. You went through Mason's things. I asked you a question. He remained silent. Leela's voice trembled with anger. Did you take the money meant for Mason's father? Ethan finally sighed. You really believe him? He has been unconscious for 2 days. And you still think everything is his fault. Leela stared at him. That sentence confirmed everything. She stepped backward. You knew. Ethan's expression became cold. Yes. Leela's eyes widened. You knew his father was dying. I knew the treatment money wasn't reaching him. Why? Ethan smiled bitterly. Because I needed Mason out of the way. Leela felt as if the entire world had collapsed around her. You caused his father's death. I didn't kill him. Ethan's voice remained calm. I simply made sure the money went somewhere else. His condition was already serious. Leela slapped him. You monster. Ethan grabbed her wrist. Don't pretend you're innocent. Leela froze. You chose me over him, I only gave you the excuse. She stared at him. Ethan continued. You hated the idea of spending your life with a poor man, you were already unhappy. That isn't true. Then why did you divorce him? Leela couldn't answer. Ethan smiled. Because of me. She pulled her hand away. No. Her voice became quiet. I divorced him because I was stupid. Inside the hospital room, Mason slowly opened his eyes. The ceiling was blurry. His body felt unbearably heavy. A nurse noticed immediately. You're awake. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Dad. The nurse froze. She knew what I meant. Hey. She couldn't finish. I closed my eyes. I already knew. Then another thought entered my mind. My son. Where is my son? The nurse hesitated. Your wife is outside. I shook my head. Don't call her. The door suddenly opened. Leela rushed inside. Mason. I looked at her. Our eyes met. She had been crying. Her eyes were swollen, and for the first time I saw genuine fear on her face. Mason, I'm sorry. I turned my face away. She walked closer. I know everything. I remained silent. Ethan was behind it. My eyes slowly moved toward her. He diverted the money meant for your father. I stared at her. She began crying. I didn't know. I quietly asked. But you believed him. Leela lowered her head. Yes. While I begged you to save my father. She couldn't answer. I begged you. My voice cracked. You told me there was nothing you could do. Tears rolled down her face. I was wrong. No. I shook my head. You weren't just wrong. I looked directly at her. You chose not to believe me. She covered her mouth. I know. Dad died thinking I had abandoned him. Leela began sobbing. I'll make it right. You can't. She looked at me. Why? Because he's dead. The room became silent. I continued. Money can't bring him back. Leela took a step toward me. Then let me stay. I looked at her. For what? To take care of you. I gave a weak laugh. You should take care of our son. I will. And then. She didn't answer. I looked away. We're divorced. Her tears fell again. I haven't signed it. You will. No. She shook her head. I won't. I stared at her. You said you wanted Ethan. I was wrong. You said I was occupying the position he should have had. I was wrong. You said you wished I would disappear. Her face turned pale. I never meant it. But I heard it. She slowly sat beside the bed. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I closed my eyes. Don't. She froze. Don't waste your life trying to repair something you destroyed. That evening, Ethan was arrested. Leela personally handed the evidence to the police. The investigation quickly uncovered the hidden accounts. Ethan had manipulated the medical payments, forged documents, and arranged the attack that had been blamed on Mason. But there was something worse. He had planned to make Mason look mentally unstable and responsible for everything. His final goal had been simple. Mason would disappear. Leela would eventually marry Ethan. And no one would ever discover the truth. But the plan had failed. Weeks passed. Mason recovered physically. But emotionally, he was completely different. He moved into a small apartment with his son. Leela visited every day. She brought food. She brought clothes. She brought toys for their son. But Mason never let her stay long. One evening their son asked, Daddy, why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore? Mason looked at him. Because sometimes adults make mistakes. Is Mommy bad? Mason remained silent. Then he said, No. Then why can't she come home? Mason looked through the window. Because saying sorry doesn't always make everything the way it was. Outside, Leela was standing at the door. She heard every word. She quietly wiped away her tears. For 10 years, she had believed Mason would always be waiting for her. Now she finally understood the cruelest truth. She had spent 10 years taking his love for granted. And it had taken losing him to realize how much he meant to her. But this time Mason wasn't waiting. He had already moved on. And Leela had no idea whether she would ever have another chance.